Lincronaozoine Id Pepopa by Claudio Monteverdi. Let's take a quick look at the long title of this composition, Lincronaozoine Id Pepopa. Let's take a look particularly at the word incoronazione. If you look within it, you will see the beginning of a familiar English word, C-O-R-O-N-A. Okay, you may be thinking of Corona, a type of beer, but I'm thinking of the beginning of the word coronation. The title means the coronation of Pepopa, and we'll take a look at the details of this very interesting story in just a moment, but let's first turn our attention to a few other basic matters. By the way, notice that the work was written in 1642, right toward the end of Monteverdi's life. Monteverdi, as we recall, was one of the first composers to write for the first public opera houses in Venice. In terms of genre, this work is an opera. And, as you already know, it was composed for performance in a public opera house. Although the name Pepopa may not ring a bell for you, Pepopa was an important figure in ancient Roman history, so the subject of this opera, therefore, is classical, like most serious operas of the Baroque and the Classical era. And this opera tells the story of the life and the loves of a Roman emperor. Eventually, you will be tested on the story of each of the operas that we take a look at, as well as the identities of the three main characters in an opera. You are, however, relieved of that obligation for now, so use our look at the first three operas in this course as practice for what you will need to know for the last three operas that we take a look at in this course. Let's begin by taking a look at the three main characters of this work by Monteverdi. Although Pepopa is a person most would not recognize, almost everyone has at least heard at one time or another about Nero. Nero was a Roman emperor, perhaps one of the most notorious of all the Roman emperors. In fact, he was not even born to become an emperor, but his ambitious mother, Agrippina the Younger, married the Emperor Claudius. After their marriage, she persuaded her husband to put Nero in line for the throne, ahead of his own natural-born sons, and once this was accomplished, she murdered her husband and reigned as the empress until Nero came of age. It's sometimes difficult to separate fact from fantasy when you take a look at the life of Nero. In fact, some of the stories about them are so horrible, it's difficult to believe that they actually happened. But everyone agrees that he did at least one thing right in his life. That is, he married Ottavia, a virtuous Roman woman who was everything that he was not. She was modest, she was moderate in her behavior, virtuous, again, basically everything that Nero was not. Nero's romantic attentions were not fixed entirely on his wife, and he eventually took up with Pepopa, an ambitious Roman lady who perhaps reminded him of his own mother, Agrippina the Younger, the lady who married the Emperor Claudius. By the way, all of these people, the Emperor Claudius, Agrippina the Younger, Nero, Ottavia, and Pepopa, were all related. Basically, this is a story about a very interesting family. You will need to prepare yourself to hear a recording of an excerpt from this opera, and one of the things that you will notice is that the part of Nero is sung by a female singer. The reason for this is very simple. The type of singer that created the role of Nero in Baroque performances of this work no longer exists, and I refer to the castrato. Castrato is an Italian past participle, and it simply means castrated. and it refers to the surgical procedure that was used to create this voice type. Now, this voice type is not what you might imagine it to be. A castrato is essentially someone who undergoes this procedure before the onset of adolescence, and that surgical procedure basically arrests the development of the voice. It does not become low as it normally does in men. But the body of a castrato continues to grow. In fact, castrati were great big fellows. So what we have is the boy of a voice in the very large and powerful body of a man. And the voice itself sounds something like a boy on steroids. As you can tell by hearing recordings, we have about 20 of them from the last surviving castrato. Although this voice type might seem an unusual choice to us for such works, during the Baroque era it was typically used for heroic masculine lead roles in operas. So Nero, being the heroic masculine lead role in this work, would have been sung by a castrato, and only villains, or the bad guys, were sung by men in their natural voices. Indeed, many believed that the castrato was ideal for heroic masculine lead roles in Baroque operas. In fact, it seems to make some sense if you think about it this way. The castrato stands apart from all other singers in the same way that a hero stands apart from the rest of humanity. So it makes sense to have an extraordinary voice type for an extraordinary figure in a drama. Now let's turn our attention to the three types of operatic music that you're going to hear in this scene from Monteverdi's Lincronaozoine Id Pepopa. You already know something about these three types of music: recitative, arioso, and aria. Basically, recitative and aria are basically polar opposites in terms of songs, and arioso is a type of music that is something between these two kinds of songs. And in fact, we will happen to hear these types of music in exactly that order. So you'll have a chance to compare recitative with arioso, and you'll get a chance to compare aria with recitative. Now let's take a look at the text that the singers sing in this particular scene. You probably recall that I told you earlier that it's very easy to predict what kind of music you are going to hear in an opera, and in fact, by taking a look at this libretto, you can make a pretty good guess about how Monteverdi is to set each one of these sections of the text. Of course, your copy of the text provides you with the names of the types of operatic music already. You see that the first section is a recitative. The next section, sung by Nero, is an arioso. After that, there's an exchange between Poppaea and Nero that is a recitative. And at the very end of the scene, there is an aria sung by Poppaea. Now, if you take a look at what's going on in each of these sections of the scene, you will see why Monteverdi used these kinds of music in it. At the beginning of the scene, Poppaea and Nero are just having a conversation, so the simplest syllabic type of operatic music, a speech-like type of a song, recitative, seems perfectly appropriate here. In fact, this is a dialogue. Immediately thereafter, Nero steps out of the bounds of prose into poetry, and he says a rhymed couplet. He makes an exceedingly extravagant statement, and so the music changes to match it. We have an arioso. It's definitely more song-like than the recitative that precedes it, but it's not quite a real song. After that, the music returns to recitative for the exchange of dialogue between Nero and Poppaea. Basically, they're saying goodbye to each other. And then, after Nero leaves, Poppaea breaks into an aria where she reveals her true intentions. Basically, she's excited about becoming the next Roman empress.